My Twitter feed over the last few days has had an overdose of one topic: Pathan. The Shah Rukh Khan movie has turned into a massive national debate on whether social media trolling can trump the popularity of a movie star who's making a much awaited return to the big screen after 4 long years. But Bollywood is not the only industry to have been at the center of a social media storm in recent months. Several different brands have faced the brunt. From the Tata's Air India P-Gate,
a drunk man urinated on a woman co-passenger in the business class of an Air India flight in November last year and then left that flight without facing any action from the crew.
To Baiju's messy mess.
Here's a company which wanted to fire thousands of employees and then hires one of the greatest footballers of all time as a global ambassador of its social impact arm.
From Ola's burning scooters,
Ola S1 Pro in Pune emitting smoke before being engulfed in flames,
to Mama Earth's not-so-pretty valuation puzzle.
Mama Earth's IPO plans ran into rough weather soon after the company filed its draft prospectus in the last week of December. Why? Well, valuations.
To the Bharat Pay versus Ashneer Grover saga that forced the courts to ask Ashneer to maintain decorum on social media.
Now, 3 cases have been filed by Bharat Pay against Ashneer Grover.
And of course, there's the industry that seems to be the most impacted by social media trolling: Bollywood, which is holding its breath to see how Shah Rukh Khan's Pathan fares amidst intense trolling and boycott calls.
जो सच में अपने आप को हिंदू समझते हैं वो उस मूवी को कतई देखने ना जाएं, पर जो यहाँ हॉल वाले लगा रहे हैं लायक नहीं रहेंगे।
और अंधभक्तों की बात मत सुनो, इतनी अच्छी मूवी है, पिक्चर आके देखो।
But social media is not always a tool for trolling. It has become the go-to channel for citizens to also voice grievances against authorities and to seek redressal from companies. And in fact, there are some sectors in which Twitter has almost replaced the regular customer care call center. This includes sectors like aviation, telecom, and banking, where every day hundreds of complaints are made about flight delays, airport queues, call drops, the nuisance of telemarketers and credit card sellers, and of course, phishing. Love it or hate it, social media has become indispensable for brands. On this episode, we talk to brand management consultants, marketing executives, and sector experts to learn about the impact of online trolling on brands and how companies are looking at reputation management on social media. It's Friday, the 27th of Jan. I'm Mugdha Warrior, and you're listening to Saving Face on Social Media on The Morning Brief. Social media has been on steroids in recent years. In 2021, a group of retail investors on Reddit sent the stock price of American video game company GameStop rallying by nearly 700% just to bring down a global hedge fund that had shorted the stock. Bollywood naysayers also believe that the hashtag boycott Bollywood trend has been solely responsible for the Hindi film industry seeing a string of flops in recent years. But one thing is true. In the era of Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, and WhatsApp, brands simply cannot stay away from social media. In fact, they're doubling down on digital spends. Social media ad spending in India is projected to reach $1.15 billion in 2023, according to Statista. But just as much as brands love the reach and virality that social media offers, they're often caught in a social media storm over controversies and are often held accountable for their missteps. My colleague Ratna Bhushan, who tracks the consumer goods industry for the Economic Times, shares some examples of how big brands have been affected by social media noise.
I would just like to start by saying that companies can like it or hate it, but they cannot ignore it. That's been the mega learning for companies as far as social media goes. So whether they're big, small, regional, startups, whatever, does not matter. There's no escaping the trial by social media, really. I remember 1 year back, I was interviewing the president of PepsiCo, Ahmed El Sheikh, and he was telling me that all advertising and all communication that they put out is evaluated through a cultural lens now, which was not the case earlier. And let me quote him. He said, "Do we have a process? The answer is yes. Are we trying to think 2 to 3 times before we issue a new creative or any communication that we put out to ensure we don't make mistakes?" The answer is again, yes. And mind you, this is when Pepsi has not had any such issues in terms of advertising and communication in the past 3 to 4 years at least. So it's like taking preemptive action because companies are really skeptical whether it's advertising or whether it's stray incidents, anything which is consumer facing. And the Pepsi interview was the time when Fab India, Fem, Siet, Tanishq, all of these had come under massive trolling on social media. And were they wrong? Not really. They were just putting out inclusive communication or thinking differently. But they still had to apologize. They had to issue public apologies. They had to withdraw communication, withdraw ads. In some cases, they had to take police protection, as in the case of Tanishq.
Yeah.
So, and what was the reason? It was all social media, nothing else.
But is social media also holding companies accountable, especially in genuine cases of concern, be it, say, Ola or even the recent case of Air India? While, brands may, of course, look at it as a very negative trolling, is it also helping hold these companies accountable?
Absolutely. So the thing is that brands can be decimated within a day or two, sometimes 24 hours, sometimes 10 hours. There could be a barrage of tweets and there you go. And large companies like you mentioned, the Air India case. Now, the Tatas are legacy company, old world company. They generally take a lot of time to react. But the Air India episode really shook them up. It was a PR disaster from every possible angle. Before the law could take its course, before they could get their PR machinery in action, social media had decimated them. And, it led to immediate action. So all this was a result of social media. If it had not been, the impact of Twitter, things probably would have, gone very slow. So I'm saying that netizens are sort of, many steps ahead when it comes to legal recourse, especially in our country, which takes its own sweet time. So the reaction times for brands and large companies has to be also very, very swift now. There's no way that they can sort of brush it under the carpet or take their own time to deal with it.
Absolutely. But then are brands also seeing any tangible impact on their business?
For those 2-3 days, yes, it does shake up the brand. I don't know if it has reflected in their sales, but it's all about brand image as well, right? So that does impact them. I'll tell you another example. The Zomato founder, Dipinder Goyal, tweeted, we'll remember this case from late 2021, where there was a massive social media backlash after a Zomato employee told a customer he should know Hindi.
Yeah.
It started as one tweet and then it went viral like anything. The Zomato founder, Dipinder Goyal, tweeted that the level of tolerance and chill in our country needs to be way higher than it is nowadays. He got trolled for that as well. Okay, he called it an ignorant mistake by someone in a support center, but it became a national issue. And at least that time, Zomato had let go of that particular employee. So yes, it does impact. And that impact for even those few days is so massive that it may not reflect in the quarterly earnings, but those 2-3 days are enough to just shake up the company. So that is something which they cannot sort of ignore it. And for right or wrong, they have to adhere to it.
Absolutely. No, yeah, that does seem to be the case. How are companies looking to protect themselves from all this social media trolling and backlash, and especially in cases where they think that it could also, be vested interest coming from some vested parties? And I mean political parties. Is there anything they can do?
I mean, what do you do? They're skating. In the Zomato incident where that the Zomato employee told a customer that he should know Hindi. I remember some small time minister was also tweeting, what does one do? You cannot name them because they are, brute majority. At the same time, you have to be very, very wary of them. You cannot hold them accountable. You cannot question them. You just have to buckle down and take it.
Have you seen companies approach regulators or any government authorities to protect themselves as well?
So as of now, the regulator piece on this is grey. There are no guidelines as such to protect and for brands and companies to take recourse. Every company has their own safeguards. Every company has a social media team in any case. Now the teams have been trained to sort of, even manage bizarre backlash. So the intangibles is where brands are investing in. And this is 24/7. But, the legal recourse is internal. Most companies have internal systems, but there is nothing from the government side which is protecting these companies. And if they're wrong, every company has to take their individual call on this. Legal recourse will take weeks and months. By that time, your brand is decimated. So the only thing you can do is build your own interest.
How does such social media ire affect brands? Let's speak to communication strategy consultant Karthik Srinivasan, who has previously worked with Flipkart and ad firm Ogilvy, on the advice that he is giving to brands. Given that, sensibilities are being so easily hurt these days, how are companies kind of conceiving ads and branding now? And how do you yourself as a consultant approach this whole issue of ensuring that it doesn't enrage some sections?
To be very honest, it's getting more and more difficult every day because you never know what would turn somebody's outrage into a movement of sorts, at least online. So earlier, these outrages were in very small pockets. People are outraging and then forgetting all about it after a week. But now when that perspective is shared online, either on LinkedIn or Twitter or Instagram or wherever, or even on WhatsApp, it's almost like it's seeding a new perspective to see the same ad which nobody else saw it in the first place. I'm not sure whether ad agencies are capable of looking at such nuanced ways of not outraging people, because they are in the business of telling interesting stories on behalf of their brands. That's about it. Now it's become so complex. What I actually always recommend to my clients is have a high degree of self-awareness. When you put something out, whether like a script or an ad, try to be your own worst cynic and critic and try to argue against every single thing that you have shown with some self-awareness. Then you would actually come to a middle point, what's worth showing, what's not worth showing.
But I just wanted to understand from you, how does such backlash on social media actually affect brands?
I personally believe that it affects brands only from the point of view of the real world decision that people can make as an outcome of the chatter and an opinion that's been formed.
Right.
For instance, if people say that they are boycotting Airtel, even with mobile number portability, people won't even bother switching their number because they are angered by an ad made by Airtel. They would say that they are boycotting for at least for the show's sake. But the kind of effort it takes in the real world, you need to sign up, you need to ask for them to do this, you need to port from one to another, you need to be sure that Jio is better or Vodafone is better, whatever it is, and then you need to move. So it takes a lot of time and effort to do that. On the other hand, take a movie.
Yeah.
A movie ticket is about 200 to 300 rupees at the minimum at the base level, and it's easy to ignore and move on. So it's far easier to show off as if you are boycotting a movie because the costs are very low, the effort is very, very low. So it's very easy to do it. Imagine a bank. If you are angered by a bank's advertisement or a bank's stand that it has taken sometime, if you say that you're going to boycott the bank and all your dealings are with that bank, your home loan, your vehicle loan, your bank account, everything is there with the bank, imagine the sheer effort it would take to move out of that bank. Nobody would, in their right mind, would want to do that. Unless there is a transformative thing that the bank has done and there is absolutely no moral way that you're going to stick with that bank, which doesn't happen much actually because brands don't piss off people at that level. So the real effect depends on how much effort it takes to move out of that brand or a product or a service That is what really matters. Not that people are talking about it and I'm also outraged about it, actually, to be fair.
According to you, which companies have actually done a good job in handling this social media ire?
I mean, one of my favorite examples is of Zomato. Zomato consistently handles social media anger reasonably well, partly because they just put all their cards very honestly outlined on the thing. And then they also have a very vocal CEO who takes a stand and point of view much more than any other CEO that I've taken on the public space generally. So I've seen Zomato does it very well. Most brands generally tend to cave into the outrage these days. That seems to be the safest way to avoid any further issues. For instance, Tanishq's 2020 ad where they showed a Hindu girl in a Muslim family, which was pilloried for absolutely no reason at all except showing a very happy, normal family. But it went into places and it went offline also where their showrooms were targeted by people and they removed that ad. But if you actually notice Tanishq's yearly, results after that year in 2020 end or 2021, it did very, very well. There was absolutely no issues at all, despite people saying, I'm going to boycott Tanishq. And those people might not even have considered buying Tanishq in the first place at all. So that really happened. Fab India went through the same process. They had the Diwali campaign, which outraged a lot of people for completely no reason except the fact that there was an Urdu phrase to mention Diwali. It was called, I think, Jashne Diwali or something. And for that, people are very, very angry with Fab India. If you look at Fab India's results at the end of the year, it actually did very well. There was absolutely no issues at all. That quarter, there was actually a dip, but it can also be attributed to the pandemic. And people actually piled on the quarter results saying, see, this happened because of the boycott. But they forgot to see the annual results where they did actually quite well. There was absolutely no issues at all.
But while we are talking about trolling, there is also genuine criticism that comes online. And also, what is disturbingly emerged is also this paid defamation. Remember that Meesho last year filed cases against some social media influencers saying that, they were paid to attack and target Meesho. So how do you differentiate between all of this, just plain trolling, actual criticism, and say, paid targeting?
Paid targeting is a different level altogether because that's not trolling, that's not criticism, that's actually sabotage, literally, because you're paying somebody to bring down a brand, which is a third level. Merely uses criticism, but it's technically sabotage of a brand because it's being paid to do that. You're being paid to actually bring down a rival brand, whatever it is. So that's there.
Correct.
Which has also happened offline, basically, because brands usually remove the banners and ads offline of another brand, rival brand, and paste their own posters, kind of. So that's happened offline also. That's happening now. So that's illegal. That's a crime. But between criticism and trolling, it's a fine line. Generally, I try to tell my clients and also the other people, generally saying trolling requires sustained effort to do the same thing again and again. If you keep pointing out the mistakes again and again, and if you also say it in a very personal way that this brand sucks, this brand is annoying, this brand is irritating, that's a very personal reaction to a brand. But if you're pointing out to a flaw in either the buying experience or the brand quality of the product, that's not trolling at all. Brands need to be slightly more evolved to understand the difference between the two.
But are brands evolved enough to distinguish between trolling and genuine criticism? Currently, most brands deploy amateur bots that blindly respond to social media posts that mention the name of the brand, regardless of the context. Ajay Kakkar, who was till recently the Chief Marketing Officer at Aditya Birla Capital and has also spent years as the country head for public relations at Ogilvy, says there are some clear signs.
So there are some obvious and some so not obvious ways, Mugdha. But if you ask me, the obvious ways to recognize a not so genuine voice of consumer is it will be nameless, it may be faceless, it could be cut-paste repetitiveness of the message with people who possibly just opened recent accounts. The messaging may be malicious, unreasonable, may have personal attacks, may have shades of character assassination, which make you believe, is it motivated? And therefore, if it's something genuine, you will sense it, you will address it. But if somebody does not want to be named, does not want to show his face, does not want to elaborate, for example, if you just have one word, and in financial services, we used to face a lot of it, chore. Now, if you just say chore and you don't substantiate, and when I reach out to you and I ask you what pains you, can I help you? And there is chore. and there are 10 people who are saying chor hai in different words, in different languages, but nearly the same words, then you know that it's possibly paid for bots or trolls. And then you know the reality of something called a troll factory, right? Where you have all of this decibel level coming in minutes and seconds, and it's as if, it's been motivated. You can make that out. And I think a brand should not engage with individuals, whether it's trolls, which are seen as motivated or malicious. A brand can and should report and block them out or call them out. And that's where I think that whether it's a regulator or it's the platforms have a huge role, because these faceless entities, you can't stop them. It's like Jamtara, as I said. For every 10 you stop, there are hundreds which will come up. But if the platform wears that responsibility, I believe that really helps distinguish and address what we are calling trolls.
Coming to the world of financial services, which you've been part of over the last several years. And, especially given that during the pandemic over the last few years, we have seen many people start investing in mutual funds and stock markets, take life insurance, etc. And a lot of these are younger customers of even Aditya Birla Capital and of other companies who are also very active on social media. So you would be seeing a lot of customer feedback, consumer complaints on social media. How did you at Aditya Birla manage social media? And what is your marketing strategy around social media?
So let me give you a specific example, Mugdha, which got a little more heightened around COVID. One of the companies under Aditya Birla Capital brand is Aditya Birla Finance, which is the lending arm of the business. And if you've seen the OTT program Jamtara, you'll know what I'm talking about. Phishing as an industry, right? It's all around you. And we faced that. We faced a lot of that. And we also had some derogatory audiovisuals spreading on YouTube, where it was talking about how we gave loans to people who did not warrant a loan, who did not deserve a loan, because we were just as good as distributing loans freely. Now, what can you do when there's a faceless entity or millions of faceless entities who are doing this as a business? So I think we had two strategies that helped us in good stead. The first was to make sure that we reached out to all our existing customers, our existing partners, and telling them that, one, there is a fact that this is happening across the industry, and we are also being targeted by such elements. We talked to them about proactively what they can do to, and we circulated tips or recommendations for people to be cautious and beware and recognize a Jamtara, if I may so call it, before even responding or acting upon such luring offers. And I think this did very well for us, both on numbers of complaints, but more important, I think what you've been talking about, the reputation and the empathy with the brand. I think genuine brands which have earned sympathy over years, which have earned loyalists over years, they find themselves forgiven much faster. And be it the case of a Pepsi or a Coke or a Cadbury's or Maggie, I think the reason why consumers chose to listen to them and genuinely give them an ear and genuinely give them the benefit of doubt or trust the corrective action they were taking is because the brand relationship was genuine, it was authentic, and it was tenured. So I think tenured brands do have an edge while facing such controversies, trolls, or complaints.
When it comes to handling social media trolling, several brands have simply backed off and removed their ads or posts. But some brands have stood up to the tirade. Swati Bhattacharya, creative chairperson of FCB Ulka, who has worked closely with several leading brands on ads and marketing, talks about some of her campaigns that received backlash but stood their ground.
So I did a Domino's campaign about 2.5 years, 3 years back, which was about a newlywed arranged marriage couple on the terrace. And the boy kind of confesses to her that he eats non-veg because he orders a non-veg pizza for him and he orders a veg pizza for her. And he says that, "Tum niche kisi ko mat batana, main non-veg khata hu." And the girl takes the pizza from him in that very and she says, तुम भी किसी को मत बताना, मैं छत पे वेज नहीं खाती. And it was a very sweet moment that, arranged marriage, just little things. And there were many people who loved it, but there were also many people who were like, as if Domino's is like kind of trying to infect everybody, ki har vegetarian ke andar ek non-vegetarian chupa. And they tried to make it, bring religion and everything. But what was so great that my client at that point he said he held on to it. And there was a lot of little bit on Twitter, but we didn't go. And it actually worked. Because, you cannot make communication so tight boxy. We can't look at Indians as this and that. The fact that chat ke upar you can create a makeshift kitchen is something which is so Indian that you cannot say that this is just something like to create kind of fire in social media. So I feel just be true. For me, the most important thing is be authentic. There was this Tanishq ad, which I think they got really scared and then they removed it. Or there was a Fab India thing and they got really scared and they removed it. And I think they removed it so quickly that sometimes it's important, if you believe in something, to stand your ground, because the hate wave, because then there are other people who believe in what you believe in and then they fight for you.
Most brands like to stay away from controversies, sometimes due to the threat of real violence. Some Tanishq showrooms needed police cover following the social media outrage over its ad. And often, brands choose to disengage from celebrity brand ambassadors over offensive or controversial social media posts, like what happened to American celebrity Kanye West with brands such as Adidas, Gap, and several others. But not all brands take trolling lying down. There have been several cases where brands have hit back at social media criticism with all their might. Remember the case of Byju's getting social media platforms such as LinkedIn to take down posts by some critics who had called out the work culture and mis-selling at the edtech company? Legal experts suggest that several brands resort to coming down hard on social media accounts that criticize or troll them by mass reporting copyright violations for the use of their brand name or logo. And experts suggest that big tech companies are especially sensitive to copyright violations and often immediately take down or block such posts. Lawyers also point out that brands can also seek recourse in the Intermediary Guidelines and Digital Media Ethics Code rules of 2021 that require social media platforms to act on instances of defamation. And often, brands are enraged enough to take legal action to protect their reputation on social media. The latest case in point being BharatPay's defamation case against its former managing director, Ashneer Grover, over his extremely provocative but highly entertaining tweets. The court has now asked Ashneer to maintain decorum on social media. Well, let's see how long that lasts. Former film journalist Rajiv Masand says that brands are also becoming more cautious, especially in signing on actors who may be in the middle of a controversy.
There is a cynicism about some actors, and I don't believe that brands are completely unaffected. I mean, brands ride on an actor's popularity. They're kind of mooching off the popularity of movie stars so that people buy their brands, so buy the products. So I do believe it certainly affects them. But I also think it's sort of intangible, right? How do you measure tangibly how much an actor's popularity has been dented by a controversy? So I think brands eventually will look at, is this actor successful in the movies? Has this film done well? That's at least a tangible metric to gauge an actor's popularity or not, an actor's success or not. And I do agree with you that I think there will be some amount of trepidation, perhaps anxiety, when an actor that a brand is working with or intends to work with finds himself at the center of a controversy. But I don't think that lasts very long. We've seen that in the case of people who were dragged into controversies and brands have gone back to them and they've had bigger and bigger brands.
In his recent newspaper column, Rajiv Masand had written about how Bollywood has seen several challenges over recent years, be it the pandemic, piracy, or the rise of online streaming platforms. The boycott Bollywood trend, he says, is just another challenge that the industry will bounce back from. But has brand Bollywood taken a hit? And was 2022 a bad year for Bollywood only because of the boycott trend? Or also because the content simply did not match up to what the audience was expecting?
I think there has been an overarching, larger sort of cynicism that has set in as far as Bollywood is concerned. I think a big part of it, of course, is the pandemic. The rules completely changed. It was inevitable, going into the pandemic that the film theatrical business would change and would be badly hit. In 2022, actually, I would say to some degree, the theatrical business bounced back. Because if you see the collections of films like Gangubai Kathiawadi, you see the collections of films like Kashmir Files, you see Bhool Bhulaiya 2. I mean, I'm not comparing them to budgets. I'm just saying in terms of sheer footfalls, actually the theatrical business has bounced back. And I think one of the reasons for that is not so much the boycott trend, but also because Bollywood has to admit that we've just not been making good films. Boycott Bollywood, yes, to some degree. I would say to a very, very minimal degree. But I also genuinely believe that if people want to see something, they're not going to be waylaid, or their mind is not going to be changed because there is a hashtag social media trend that's going on that's saying boycott this film. So to a very small, very, very minuscule degree, certainly the boycott Bollywood trend would have likely affected films, but that's not the big reason.
That's a very interesting point, Rajiv, because even if you just look at, say, an example of Amir Khan, right? A lot of people have gone back to his movie PK and his interviews where he talks about intolerance, etc. And they've brought that up, at the time of Lal Singh Chadda.
Correct.
But, we forget that there was also a dangal in between that did really well, even after all of those movies and all those cases. Dangal did really well because of the content.
Correct.
When it comes to, say, a Lal Singh Chadda and Amir Khan, do you think it was just the content that that slipped and not the boycott trend?
I think it was. I think the boycott trend was certainly in full swing. But I genuinely believe that people didn't connect with the trailer. I mean, if you just go back and look at the reactions to the trailer, they were middling. They were disappointed. I mean, people just didn't feel like this was something that they wanted to see. I also think that to some degree, perhaps people didn't want to see a remake. I mean, a huge chunk of his audience is an audience that is already exposed to American films. I think people didn't want to see a remake to Forrest Gump. But whatever be the reason that they didn't go, I don't put it down to the boycott trend. If you track the film's performance on Netflix, it's actually been pretty good. Netflix has released data saying that it has been doing very well since it's dropped on Netflix. So it means that it's not like people rejected Amir Khan's film or they don't want to see Amir Khan on screen. They just felt that this particular film doesn't need the urgency. We don't need to watch it this weekend. We can wait.
When it comes to Pathaan, right, we have seen that there has been so much of this boycott Bollywood trend that's playing out. Now we are seeing some kind of violent protests, say, in Assam. And in fact, I wanted to ask you whether the CBFC asking for changes in the movie, do you think that it is actually a fallout of this whole social media noise, or did that just have a very limited impact?
I mean, it's hard to say with any surety whether it was, but I think it would be naive to pretend that what's going on social media, and frankly, it's not just on social media, right? Whatever happens on social media is also happening in the traditional national media as a result.
Yes.
I think it would be naive to pretend like they're unaware and any decision that the censor board takes or that the CBFC takes is completely in isolation. I'm pretty sure it's a response to what they believe is perhaps a national sentiment, but it's unhealthy. It's an unhealthy practice. It's an unhealthy trend, because if you saw that CBFC report, I mean, it seemed bizarre to say the least. I've been a board member of the CBFC, and the idea is to is to protect the freedom of speech and expression, unless there is threats to national security, unless it is you're putting the life and the reputation of children and families at risk. I think the example you gave, Mugdha, of Pathaan is a great example, because I think that's the right film to judge it by, also because it's this big, massive film by this massively popular superstar who's returning after 4 years. I think this week the film releases is when we will really know whether the boycott Bollywood trend had any impact and how seriously it should be taken. But it certainly doesn't look like it's going to be a muted affair.
In fact, Rajiv, I mean, do you think that all of this boycott, Pathaan, etc., all these trends have actually helped create a buzz around the movie? I mean, of course, it's Shah Rukh Khan's movie, and like you said, he's returning after 4 years. But, some of his last movies also didn't really do too well. So do you think that there is actually this buzz that will actually give that initial boost? Book My Show shared on Monday that 1 million tickets were sold in advance sales, and analysts say that over 4 lakh tickets were sold in advance bookings across national cinema chains and as of Monday. So how much do you think all the buzz around the movie is going to help it?
There was a time, not very long ago, when one would say all publicity is good publicity, good or bad publicity helps a film. And I think that the film industry also believed that, and that's why they sometimes stoke those fires and kind of, were happy to participate, even if occasionally there was a controversy just before a film's release. People had become very cynical about it, and sometimes it helped those films. But I don't think that is the case now. I'll tell you why. I also think in those times you were in control of those controversies. The film producers were sometimes in control of those controversies. Lately, it's completely out of their control. I don't think any producer is thinking that, oh my God, if my film has this hashtag Bollywood boycott Bollywood trend, sort of running alongside, that it's going to help my film. I don't think producers are thinking of that, because I know that they realize that it's not in their control. Where it goes from there is completely out of their control. So I don't think anyone is thinking that this kind of publicity or this kind of attention is benefiting the film.
Like Rajiv Masand said, the boycott Bollywood trend may not have really impacted Pathaan, which is off to a great start. Branding and marketing experts also believe that much of the online anger doesn't often translate into real-world action. E-commerce giants like Amazon and Flipkart have often faced boycott calls on social media, but that hasn't necessarily made a dent in their sales. But this doesn't mean that things won't spiral out of control. It has spilled over into the offline world several times. Social media is not really an isolated channel, and a simple online post can have a butterfly effect on brands and their fortunes. And often rightfully so, brands are also being held accountable for not doing the right thing. This love-hate relationship between brands and social media may not die out anytime soon. And brands may be left pondering over one question for a long time. Can the social media beast be tamed? That's all on this episode. Thank you for tuning into this podcast brought to you by the Economic Times, with show producer Vinay Joshi, sound editor Rajas Nayak, executive producers Anupriya Bahadur, Anirban Chaudhary, and Arijit Burman. The Morning Brief drops every Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. We hope you like this episode and do share it on your social media networks. The Morning Brief is now streaming on Amazon Prime Music and JioSaavn, apart from Spotify, Apple, and Google Podcasts. And of course, on ET's own audio platform, ET Play. All clips used in this episode belong to the respective owners. Credits are mentioned in the description.